So we have two very large, broad areas of philosophy that we'll be concentrating on in this course, metaphysics and epistemology, but we will be giving a lot of attention, especially in week 3 with Anselm Aquinas, and to a certain extent also in week 4, and always in the background to the question of God. And it used to be this course, I don't know now, in the course description it would say that this is a course in metaphysics, epistemology, and the problem of God. I like that, because it kind of identified exactly what we were talking about. I guess we wouldn't say that this is a theology class, but in a certain sense it is. If you look again at the word, which is always good in philosophy to look at these words that the fundamental words, they're usually Greek words. Theology comes from the Greek word theos, I believe, which means God, and again, logos, which means reasoning. So to do theology is simply to reason about God, and we'll certainly be doing that, and philosophers do that. So I would say that it would be perfectly fine to say that there is a theology component in this course. I should qualify that immediately, saying that our interest in theology is very narrow. Theology deals with itself an incredibly broad subject matter. Everything having to do with God and reasoning about it would qualify as theology. We are looking at a very narrow question in theology, and that is, does God exist? And if so, why? That is a pretty narrow interest. There are all sorts of other questions, which are perhaps more interesting questions, frankly, than whether God exists. Questions of what God is like, and really pressing questions like, if God exists, then what is the human relationship to God, and to what extent can human beings know God, and what are the consequences of God's existence or non-existence for how we view the universe as a whole. Those are incredibly interesting and important questions for us, but we will be focusing on, again, the very narrow question of God's existence, and most of our attention to theology, or really all of it, will be examining arguments for the existence of God. So, that being said, theology is reasoning about God. That is, this is a Catholic school, and I don't know how much influence that has on any of your courses, or even your philosophy, or even your theology courses. But this is a Catholic school, and the Catholic tradition is dominated by, philosophically speaking, theologically speaking, by a few very important figures, and one of whom is Thomas Aquinas, who we'll be looking at again in the 3rd week, his proofs for the existence of God. And it was a very strong point, it is a very strong fundamental point in his philosophy, that there are two sources of knowledge when it comes to anything in the world, but especially knowledge of God. There is what God reveals to us, and that can be found in the Bible, for instance, if you regard the Bible as revelation, God revealing himself and truths to human beings, and that's a matter of faith. And then there is reason. That is, that God gave us the capacity to know and to reason and to think, and he meant us to use those capacities, and one of the purposes of having those capacities is to know God, as well as to know the rest of the world. So that there is a limited knowledge we can have of God through our reason, but there certainly is, according to Thomas, certain things that we can determine purely through the natural use of our reason and without any faith or revelation. So what theology, or what at least the theology we'll be doing, asks whoever we are, whatever our religious beliefs are, to put them aside for the purposes of exercising this function. So if you are a believer in any religion, and deeply important, I'm sure, to you, and if you have faith of one sort or another, that is entirely your business. What this course and any theology course really asks you to do is to set that aside, at least for the purposes of using your reason and critically examining your beliefs reasonably, not because you want to undermine your faith, but because you want to see what can we actually find out through this God-given talent or ability, reason. Similarly, if you have no religious beliefs, if you're an agnostic or an atheist, that's fine too. There are all sorts of things that can be gotten out of theology and reasoning about God for a person who has no religious faith. It really is. It's part not only of our heritage as human beings, theology, and so we should be aware of it and we should know it. But there are things that to be discovered through the examination of these arguments that have nothing to do really with whether we personally believe in God, certain aspects of thinking and the universe. So that's the third part of what we'll be doing. You could say a fairly narrowly focused theology, reasoning about God.